Well, we talked about intelligence, mind, evolved thinking, and so on. So we'll be remiss if we don't talk about consciousness, even though we all know that consciousness is an endless debate. But we have to kind of see whether it is related to the brain in some way and whether we can say anything about its evolution. Obviously, there are theses, ideas proposed about them. And we can see here language. So this is from the Scientific American book we have been looking at, Becoming Human. The idea there is that language, foresight, and other hallmarks of intelligence are very likely connected through an underlying facility that plans rapid novel movements. We talked about baseball thrower, somebody who may be throwing a spear, cricket ball, whatever it is, right? But how is consciousness related to the brain? Is it some dark region of the brain that works without us even knowing? Things like implicit biases are often considered to be just something we do without realizing, and there are ideas about subconscious actions, and so on and so forth. So let's start with this from Stewart and Cohen 2007 paper that's quoted in chapter 3 of the book we are using, the main book. Why are there not more species with such this is also from the Scientific American. Why are there not more species with such complex mental states? So there are very nice articles on what animals think and whether they are conscious and so on as well. But here, intelligence-wise, a little intelligence can be a dangerous thing. Beyond the apes, intelligence must navigate between the twin hazards of dangerous innovation and a conservatism that ignores what the Red Queen explained to Alice in Through the Looking Glass. The Red Queen hypothesis is used a lot in evolutionary biology. It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. So genetically speaking, just to survive, be adaptable, and so on, you need to constantly keep running just to stay in the same place. Foresight is our special form of running, essential for the intelligent stewardship that the late Stephen Jay Gould of Harvard University warned is needed for longer-term survival. Again, Stephen Jay Gould is the one who also coined the term exaptation with a verba that we used already. We have become, by the power of a glorious evolutionary accident called intelligence, the stewards of life's continuity on Earth. We did not ask for this role, but we cannot abjure it. We may not be suited for it, but here we are. So this is obviously a little thing I didn't manage to correct. But coming back to the book by Hetherington and Reed on climate and human evolution, Stewart and Cohen are quoted in the book saying consciousness is an emergent, if anything is, so it may be difficult to find a convincing evolutionary story for the gradual evolution of consciousness. If it is a threshold phenomenon, a sudden expansion of the phase space for the brain function, then on an evolutionary timescale it would appear to happen virtually overnight. Some kind of a brain mutation, let's say, which we talk about generally in terms of gene mutations. The underlying hardware, wetware, might evolve continuously, but an emergent feature like consciousness can appear only when the evolution reaches a trigger point. So we should not expect to find any obvious evolutionary continuity of consciousness, but we should expect to find a general tendency towards more complex brains with more nerve cells, more memory, and faster transmission of nerve impulses, which we do. For the same reason, we should not expect to find a series of organisms that fills the gap between non-conscious and conscious animals in a continuous manner. So obviously we haven't defined consciousness in a very robust scientific way, nor have we said whether animals are conscious or not, but we are making some assumptions here. But there are ideas here saying consciousness as a physical process caused by the organization of energy in the brain. What is the idea? To explain consciousness as a physical process, we must acknowledge the role of energy in the brain. Energetic activity is fundamental to all physical processes and causally drives biological behavior. So brain uses a lot of energy, and anything that takes the brain also includes energy expenditure. Recent neuroscientific evidence can be interpreted in a way that suggests consciousness is a product of the organization of energetic activity in the brain. The nature of energy itself, though, remains largely mysterious, and we do not fully understand how it contributes to brain function or consciousness. According to the principle outlined here, this paper goes through some ways to advance this research. Energy, along with forces and work, can be described as actualized differences of motion and tension. So when you become conscious and you do something consciously, obviously there is an actualized difference. By observing physical systems, we can infer that there is something it is like to undergo actualized difference from the intrinsic perspective of the system. Consciousness occurs because there is something it is like intrinsically to undergo a certain organization of actualized differences in the brain. So the idea is that it's not metaphysical, it is physical, but the discussions on consciousness typically tend to go towards the metaphysical, humanity as a whole having a consciousness. There is a concept of the Brahman, the One, in Hindu literature, and so on and so forth. But obviously we have to do some kind of assumption about animals, humans, and so on. But what I'm going to do is create another podcast going through the cartoons that are put together by this course at Buffalo University of it used to be SUNY Buffalo, but now it's, I think, just called University of Buffalo, or University of New York at Buffalo, or whatever. And the course is on computational science of consciousness or something, and the instructor has put together references, extensive references with a bunch of cartoons, and it shows again that we are able to think in a symbolic way, and also kind of think or imagine what it would be like to be a bird, to be a zombie, to be a pig, to be a cat, whatever, right? And it comes out beautifully in many cartoons that most of you may have read. The favorite one for me is always Calvin and Hobbes, but there is Blondie, there is Charlie Brown and Snoopy, and so on and so forth. So I think it's worth just reading through those to see how human mind imagines various things and philosophizes about consciousness, the subconscious, and so on. It's definitely a little bit external to the course itself, but it is in the continuum about thinking about the evolution of the brain and its functions in terms of evolved thinking, consciousness, and just in terms of the social brain, cooperation, and social structure, gossip, everything we have discussed. So, and who doesn't like to go through cartoons, right? Some of them are really funny, and some of them are kind of poignant. And Ed Yong is a writer who has written, I think, Multitude Me or something from 2016, and he has a new book called The Immense World, where he puts together narratives about how animals actually think, and exposes issues about how little we know, how to figure out what animals think. So in that sense, consciousness and animals and non-conscious animals is kind of an assumption that may be a little based on mostly what we don't know rather than what we know. So let me come back to the next podcast and go through the cartoons just for fun. Okay?